And the contractive part would be the curvature of space-time and the vacuum energy going towards singularity at the center of the system. So, I'm going to elaborate on it. It became really clear, well, basically, that if there is an expansive and a contractive part of the universe, the expansion part is what we see as reality, which is the radiating electromagnetic emission that we see. A star, a planet, an atom, all radiate energy. That's why we see it, right? And the contractive part that we don't see would be the vacuum energy curving, space-time curving into it, generating singularity, generating the gravitational field. So now I had an inkling about the relationship between electromagnetism, radiation, and gravity.
Gravity goes into the singularity.
Gravity going towards singularity. Space-time curving towards singularity. Now, I later realized that that wasn't that outrageous of a thought. Because when Einstein wrote his field equations, he didn't solve them. Einstein just wrote the expressions. It's 10 differential equations. He couldn't solve them. A physicist that was fighting on the Russian front, right, while dodging bullets, was working hard at solving those equations after they were published. His name was Carl Schwarzschild. And he generated what's called the Schwarzschild solution. As soon as he solved Einstein's field equation, he sent a paper to Einstein with the results. And Einstein presented it to the German Academy of Science, and it became the first solution to Einstein's field equation, which we still use today. Carl Schwarzschild died 2 weeks later on the front and never had time to give further complexity to his solution. Basically, he did it without rotating the field. At first, he was trying to estimate, so he didn't have a rotating metric. And we'll see a little bit more about that later. But the first solution to Einstein's field equation was a black hole. It's called a Schwarzschild singularity. It made a black hole. But because when you go towards singularity with Einstein's field equations, they go to infinity, nasty infinity, that part is ignored. It's called the unsolved nonlinear part of Einstein's field equations. So we use only the weak part of the gravitational field. The part that's not curving very much towards singularity. The part that's much weaker on the outside of singularity. You guys see where I'm going with this? Oh my God. Big omission. Infinite amount of singularities just scrapped because it didn't fit our concepts. So I started to think, well, okay, if the universe is expanding and the universe is contracting, then there's got to be geometry to describe that. There's got to be a structure that describes the contractive side. the expansion side was pretty easy to figure out. If things are expanding from a point, from a center, then they must be expanding radially. It must make the geometry of a sphere. Right? The expansive part being the geometry of a sphere. That's what we see. A sun, a planet, a galaxy. Galaxies have galactic halos that are perfect spheres around them. Atoms, cells, whatever. Spheres. So we see the sphere part because that's the expansion part. But what I wanted to know about was the contractive structure of the vacuum. Why did I want to know about that? Because if I understood the structure of the contractive part of the vacuum, then I understood the geometry of the foundation of creation. Do you guys follow me there? Because if that's what creates, if that's the general active thing, that's the thing that holds things together, then that's the key to the force of creation of all things. If you have a sphere or a ball on the end of a rope and you spin the rope, you're going to feel a force outside pulling away from your hand, right? That is not a true force. It's called centrifugal force. It's not a true force because the only reason that force is occurring is because the ball is attached to the rope, which is attached to your hand. The centripetal force, the force that's holding the ball to the center, is what's making it go in a circle. Without the string, the ball is going straight and there's no force. You guys follow me? So actually the force that holds to the center is the primary force from which the illusionary radiation occurs. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, that has huge implication in philosophy as well. Because if you go inward, deeper and deeper, then you would expect more and more radiance to occur. Because you have a feedback relationship between the internal gravitational collapse and the external expansion of the electromagnetic field. So I was really excited about that, but I didn't know what was the geometry or the structure of the collapse. I knew one thing, is that the geometry of the collapse had to be in equilibrium. So I looked and I thought, well, if the sphere is the highest volume possible, which it is, then the geometry, so it's the highest volume possible because it's expanding, right? Then the geometry of the collapsing vacuum must be the smallest geometry possible. The smallest volume. The volume that's collapsing. And that is a tetrahedron. Everybody here knows what a tetrahedron is? Okay. While I'm traveling, it's kind of hard to bring all my models. But this is a double tetrahedron. Okay, there's two there. Actually, there's 8 making an octahedron in the middle. But we're not going to get too complex here. If you have a tetrahedron, you have 4 faces, 4 equilateral triangle faces. It's like a pyramid with a triangle base. Okay? It's like 3 triangle faces with a triangle base. It's the smallest volume possible. And thus, that had to be the final geometry of the class. Well, you know, when I was thinking about these things, it was almost 15 years ago, there wasn't people, like if you go in Sedona right now, you know, like, or, you know, Burning Man or whatever, you know, there wasn't people going around with tetrahedrons on their heads and like living in tetrahedron houses, and, you know, having tetrahedron cars and stuff like that. You know, at that time, nobody even knew what the heck was a tetrahedron. I mean, it was not so common, although, you know, that comes all the way back from the Pythagorean school and then Plato schools and so on.